Hello everyone and welcome to Aero Innovations. I'm Aero, your AI host. I'm going to do something a little different today. You guys are in for a real treat. I was originally going to finish up my sessions for June, showcasing my 20th and 21st winning sessions. This has admittedly been the longest streak I've ever had, but not much happens in those sessions. There's a whole lot of poo-poo and pee-pee. I win a whopping $158 for my 20th session and a gigantic $506 for my 21st winning session. Neither session was particularly entertaining though. At the rate which I'm recording footage versus how fast my wife can edit videos, I'm skyrocketing way ahead of her. I just finished recording video footage for episode 19, whereas we only just finished releasing vlog number 6. For those of you waiting for the carnage, don't worry. A whole lot of it happens in July. You'll get your pound of flesh. In the meantime, enjoy one of my favorite sessions from footage you wouldn't otherwise have seen until vlog number 18. I start my session at 12:37 in the morning on July 27th. As usual, we're playing at the Wynn Encore in Las Vegas, where I bind for $1,500, which is 300 big blinds. I sit down at a table where everyone is straddling. 35 minutes into the session, the middle position opens for 30. The low jack, high jack, and cutoff all call. I have this incredible hand in the small blind. It's Queen 8 offsuit. It's a natural 8. I mean, I'm only losing to a natural 9. Oh wait, are we not playing Baccarat? I must have forgotten because I decide to call. The big blind and straddle fold, so we go 5 ways out of position to a flop of 10, jack, 5, rainbow. What am I supposed to do with this massive gut shot draw and 1 over that I have? Obviously, I check. Everyone checks it to the button, who throws out a bet of 120. I've only been on the table for a short while, but I've already seen some ridiculous shenanigans from this guy. I saw him overbet an ace-king board with jack-deuce offsuit when checked to in a 6-handed pot. You know, the old no pair, no draw. I also saw a super tight old guy call an all-in shove from him for $600 with pocket jacks on a king-high board. The guy actually had pocket queens that hand, so he legitimately had him notched, but that's more than enough information for me. We're dealing with another El Pollo Loco! So against this $120 bet, I tank for a moment. I'm definitely not folding. I'm deciding whether to just smooth call or raise. I don't want to raise in such early position only get trapped by a snake lying in the reeds, so ultimately I decide to just call. Thankfully, everyone else folds. The turn is a deuce of diamonds. I check, with intentions of check raising. Unfortunately, my opponent checks the action back. Damn it! That'll make what I have to do much harder. But at least my assessment of the situation was correct. The river brings a 4 of clubs. I have squadouche. I decide to lead with a small bet of, $400.
Oh, you're king queen.
No king queen. Close. It's kind of funny how much confidence you exude when you tell the truth. My opponent goes into the tank for well over a minute. I'm sweating bullets. Just kidding, I've been doing this for too long. But 20 years ago, I might have looked something like this. Eventually, after a minute and a half, he shows and folds king deuce of spades for a random bet on the flop that turned bottom pair. I table my hand and show him that he had the right read because I'm looking forward to doing battle with him again. 3 hands later, I open to 35 in the cutoff with king queen offsuit, the button and straddle call. We go 3 ways to a flop of queen, jack, 5 with 2 clubs. The straddler checks. I lead for a 2/3 pot bet of 75. The button calls with a remaining stack of about 900 and the straddle folds. The turn is a 5 of hearts. Fantastic, that changes nothing, except it reduces the worry of a set of 5s slow playing the flop against me. I raise my bet sizing to 3/4 with a bet of 200. My opponent calls in less than 3 seconds. This is almost always a draw, except I did just show a massive bluff, so it's possible he has a queen here. The river brings a 10 of hearts. This is not ideal. Every plausible combination of a queen should have me beat here. However, it's not a terrible river either because all of the obvious straight and flush draws missed. Normally, I would just check call this river and let a missed draw try to bluff me, but since I did just make a huge bluff only 3 hands ago, I decided to go for thin value and smash the river with a bet of 400. I'm targeting a weak suited queen or a big jack who wants to make the news for being a hero. Instead, my opponent folds, but we're up a sizable $485 50 minutes into the session. For this next hand, we're down to 5-handed. The straddle is still on, of course. The crazy guy has sadly left. Since we're so short-handed, I limp in the +1 with queen 10 offsuit. Everyone folds to the straddler, who raises to 40, which I consider pretty weak since he's out of position against me. I 3-bet to 150 after limping, which does the trick. He quickly folds. This is exactly why I sometimes limp with hands as strong as kings or aces. It's to balance out when I limp with a mediocre hand I don't want to play in a raised pot, but can credibly represent a much bigger hand than I actually have. Here, the button opens to 30. I debate raising, but hate doing so out of position, so elect to just call with ace-10 offsuit in the small blind. The big blind and straddle call also. We go 4 ways out of position to a flop of ace-3-3 rainbow. This is an incredibly polar flop. I lead with a tiny bet of 20. Only the original raiser calls. The turn is a queen of hearts, keeping the board rainbow. I don't mind the queen. It protects me from ace-jack, but it also protects my opponent if he were raising with the weak-suited ace. I don't think there's any point to betting here. There's a high likelihood we're chopping, so I check. That's not good enough for my opponent though. He puts in a tiny bet of 40. That's fine, I'm okay with that. I call. The river is another queen. Now, whoever has the bigger kicker actually does matter. I check again. Let's see what my opponent wants to do. He suddenly smashes the pink out of my sphincter with a bet of 200. That can only be ace-queen. There's like almost no other hand he can have here. I make the easy fold. For this next hand, a tight player opens to 30 in the +1 with about a $1,700 stack. Everyone else folds, but I call in the straddle with 8-9 of clubs. We go heads up out of position to a flop of 4-7-3, 2 hearts and 1 club. I flop absolutely nothing except a few backdoor draws. I check it over to my opponent. He c-bets for another 30. This board should smash my range way more than his, so I decide to float. The turn is an 8 of spades. Oh wow, I actually make top pair. I check it over to him again. This time, my opponent puts in a substantially larger bet of 85. Oh, so I guess he really does have an overpair and isn't just betting in position. You know what I have? I also have a pair, but I'm not referring to the pair of 8s on the board. I also have the knowledge that he's a tight player. I put in a milky check raise to 200. He takes less than 10 seconds to call, which I suspected he would. My raise was not intended to get him to fold. It was a chess move to build the pot, much like I did back in vlog number 3 with the 5-6 of hearts, with intentions of either making my hand to win a larger pot, or simply snatching the pot away from a player that doesn't like facing large bets. The river is the jack of spades. That does nothing for me. 9-10 does make the nuts in case I check raise the turn with 9-10 of hearts. I don't actually have anything of the sort, but it's another fear I know my opponent would be thinking about. I smashed the river with a bet of $400. Make no mistake, this is not a value bet. This is pure highway robbery. There is no doubt in my mind that my opponent has me beat. I suspect he has 10s or even an overpair like queens. He tanks for an entire minute before finally folding. When dealing with tight players, this is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
We're now up $576, 1 hour and 20 minutes into the session, and we've only made one real hand so far. My table breaks, and I get moved to a new table. The straddle is no longer on. Middle position and hijack limp when the cutoff opens for $30 with over $1,500 in his stack. I call in the small blind with pocket 3s. The middle position calls, and the cutoff folds. The flop comes 9-6-6 with 2 diamonds. We both check to the original raiser who c-bets 45. I'm not positive he has anything yet, and in the event he does, I can still hit a 3, or bluff a 9, or even a diamond. I put in the call, and the middle position gets out of the way, which is perfect for my cruel intentions. The turn is an 8 of clubs. I check. The cutoff bets 80. He obviously has an overpair of some sort. I, on the other hand, have hairy donkey nipples with an underpair to the board that can very easily get counterfeited to 3 high, but I do have a massive range advantage. Don't try this at home, folks, and definitely don't try this in a game with a 100 big blind structure. I put in the check raise to 325, representing a hand like 7-5, 7-10 of diamonds, a full house, or just a naked 6. My opponent tanks for a full 45 seconds before finally folding. Man, so many people accuse me of sun running. You have gained a skill point in deception. I don't need to actually make hands if I can outplay my opponents. A few minutes later, the under the gun opens to 15. The +1 calls. I 3-bet to 75 with ace-king of hearts in the hijack. It folds around to the original raiser who calls, but the +1 folds. The flop comes king, queen, 9 with 1 heart and 2 spades. My opponent checks, and I put in a c-bet of another 75. This board is incredibly wet. If I get check raised here, I would just fold. Instead, my opponent folds. We're now up $903, 2 hours into the session. I've only made top pair twice this entire time. No sets, no straights, no flushes, no overpairs. For this next hand, I have 5-7 of spades in the small blind. The cutoff opens to 15 after rebuying for the minimum of 400. He just lost his entire stack, 3-betting huge with pocket 8s in the straddle, firing again on a 10-eye flop, and then shoving for over 600 when a queen hit the turn. He literally overshoved with third pair and got snap called by queen 10 suited. So for this hand, the button calls. I call, and the big blind calls. The flop comes king, 6, 3, rainbow. I don't have anything except a gut shot and a backdoor flush draw. We all check to the original raiser, who leads for 40 into the $60 pot. The button folds. I consider my options. His stack isn't very large. It's hardly worth drawing to a gut shot here. It's just that I don't think he really has anything, and I might be able to take the pot down on a future streak. In retrospect, this play is best suited in position. Out of position, I should have just folded. But since I like pain, I decided to call, and everyone else folds. The turn is a jack of spades. That's a pretty good card, all things considered. I now have a flush draw to go with my gut shot straight draw. Since I suspected my opponent of having a weak hand, I should have just led here. But that would be perfect play, and since I'm not Mike Apostle, I don't always make perfect plays. I check, and my opponent checks it back. So my suspicions were true. He's probably just making a tilted c-bet. The river is a black 3, pairing the board, but unfortunately it's the 3 of clubs. I'm sitting here with 7 high. A lead on the turn may have made my bluff more plausible. I know I need to bluff here if I want any chance of winning this pot, but how much should I bet? If I bet too small, I'm going to get called by naked 6, or a small pocket pair like 7s, 8s, or 9s. On the other hand, my opponent is pretty tilted. If I make a big bet, he might call with those types of hands anyways. I can give up the $55 I have invested, but I'm a greedy bastard. I decide to throw out a bet of 100. My opponent snap calls with Jack Queen of diamonds, and I get caught with my hand in the cookie jar for the first time tonight. How would you guys have played this hand? Let me know in the comments. After that last hand, I lose some insignificant hands leading up to this next hand. I'm currently up $590, 2 hours and 53 minutes into the session. Here I have Queen 10 of spades on the button. The +1 limps when the low jack opens for $30. It's our opponent from the last notable hand. This is a much larger than normal open raise amount, but crazy action guys are allowed to do that and get away with it. This open amount from a tight player would signify an absolutely massive hand like queens or above. But from this guy, it could be anything. The cutoff calls. I decide to make a speculative call on the button. The under the gun +1 calls as well, so we go four-handed in position to a flop of queen, 8, 3, with 2 hearts. Everyone checks it over to me. I flop top pair, but I'm not super proud of my kicker. I'm not exactly holding the type of hand that was looking to flop 1 pair. I could go either way between keeping the pot manageable by checking back, or by betting small to at least deny equity from small pocket pairs. I could also get a naked 8 to call with a bet on the smaller side, since it could look like I'm only making a positional bet. I decide to go with option B and place a bet of 50 into the pot of 125. The +1 and original raiser both call, while the cutoff folds. That was not ideal. I was expecting maybe 1 caller, but not 2. I think I'm currently good, but I don't know what my opponents are drawing to since I went with the smaller bet sizing. That's the drawback of not making pot-size bets. The turn is the deuce of hearts, completing the front door flush. Both opponents check to me again. Normally I would just shut down here and give up. I'm not invested for a ton of money. This hand is just going down really weird. The +1 was for sure calling me with some sort of questionable hand, but did the original raiser, who up until now has been super aggro as heck, really check the flop with a flush draw? I decided to bet a tentative $75. If someone turned the flush, I was already drawing dead anyways, but this way I can at least charge some weaker hands like Queen X suited, or some 8X hands if they want to continue. The +1 folds, but the original raiser calls in the low jack. The river is another 7 of hearts. Whoop whoop, 4 to a flush, baby! This is what I've been waiting all night for! My opponent leads for 125, with about 200 behind. My hands are tied here. I can't think of a single hand that I'm beating. Even if he called the flop with 10 jack or 9-10 with 1 heart, he would have already gotten there with a flush on the turn, or at least by the river. Bluffing here is completely out of the question. I can only fold. We're now up only $447. For this next hand, Gao, a super tight Chinese pro, opens to 15 in middle position. The low jack and cutoff both call. I'm holding my least favorite premium hand on the button. It's a pair of black kings from Ugandi. I'm skipping ahead here in order, but if I had shown every poker session after vlog number 6 until now, which would have been vlog number 18, the final tally for pocket kings would still be under $100 in net profits. But that's all in the past now. We're about to make a massive killing here to shake off all that bad luck and superstitious mumbo-jumbo. Guy raises with a very tight range. If I 3-bet large here, he'll snap fold all his ace-x hands, call with jacks, queens, and even kings, and 4-bet me to the moon with aces. I'll be able to escape an otherwise set-up situation with only a small loss. I'm also too deep to mess around with a small 3-bet and let in too many customers. I raise the action up to $100. Everyone folds pretty quickly. Oh yeah, baby, 50 doll hairs. After a whole lot of nothing, over an hour passes of me just missing flops and getting nickeled and dimed here and there. The table breaks and I get moved to another table again. The aggro level on this table is through the moon. I saw 2 4K pots get pushed around back to back by hands that should not have called these massive pre-flop bets, like Jack 8 suited cold calling $100 pre-flop in the big blind, then calling a $1,500 shove on an 8-eye flop. Yes, Donald, I'm talking about you. Donald is a fellow 2-5 pro who apparently had been drinking too much this night. So when the +1 limps, I don't mess around and open to 35 with jiggities in middle position. Everyone else folds, but he calls. I've seen this dude jam a turn with bottom pair no redraw after Donald bets 400, and bro only had a 1K stack with no bluff equity. Too bad for Donald that he was bluffing because he snap folded. So when the flop comes Queen 8-3 with 2 diamonds, and the +1 checks it over to me, I'm not incredibly concerned by the queen. I down bet to 30 in position. My opponent calls. We go to a turn, which is the 5 of hearts, putting 2 hearts and 2 diamonds on board. So when my opponent checks to me, I increase the heat to a bet of $100. He folds, but this is an example of not being afraid of a single high card when you're dealing with someone who's willing to stick their whole stack in with bottom pair. We're at almost 5 hours into the session now, and I'm what's called upstuck. I'm still winning, but down considerably from my high point of over $900. I just haven't really gotten anything to work with this whole night. All the money that I did make were from advanced bluffs. Maybe this next hand will change that. Yeah, right. It's pocket kings. Who am I kidding? The funny part is by some work of magic or voodoo, they refuse to be caught on camera. Fortunately, they're the same suit as when I got them earlier, so I'll just use that clip. So I'm in the big blind with pocket kings. The cutoff opens to 15 with about a $1,200 stack. The small blind calls with a $1,500 stack. This is the crazy guy who shoved with bottom pair earlier. Then again, all sorts of crazy is happening on this table, so he doesn't exactly stand out completely. If you follow the vlog, you would know by now that I'm not a huge fan of pocket kings. However, I'm too logical to play them any differently than any other premium holding, so I'm not about to do anything stupid here to frighten off the poultry. I 3-bet to 80. The cutoff and small blind both call. The flop comes Jack, 8, 6, rainbow. The small blind checks. Well, there's no ace on the flop, so there's that. I lead with a non-committal bet of 100. Nothing to see here, just your standard 40% C-bet I would make with any overpair, set, or even 2 random overcards. The cutoff calls, when the small blind suddenly check raises to an absolutely massive $400. When this guy sat down and noticed I was vlogging, he asked if he can make the vlog if he stacked me. Well, I guess here's his chance. I make the call, hoping the cutoff doesn't jam, because if he does, he will undoubtedly have a set here every time. The board is mostly dry, except for a few straight draw possibilities. Thankfully, the cutoff folds. The turn is a 4 of diamonds. 5-7 completes a straight. The small blind jams for over $1,000. If he were doing this with a bluff, he's in for a big surprise. He doesn't know that I'm a masochist, especially when it comes to pocket kings. Bring on the pain, baby! How much more can this hand hurt me? I'm down so far with this hand lifetime that I'm emotionally free-rolling. I snap call. The river brings a 7 of hearts. A 5 makes a 1-card straight. 9-10 makes the nut straight. I still lose to a multitude of 2-pair combinations as well. I'm fully prepared to pay up, but my opponent says he missed. I don't want to open myself to being slow-rolled, because from my perspective, almost every draw got there except maybe 7-9, so I wait for my opponent to show first. He shows 7-10 of clubs for a random gut shot draw on the flop that turned into a double gut draw on the turn. Holy freaking crap! I just won over a 3K pot with pocket kings! I play for another 20 minutes following this hand out of courtesy so I don't get accused of hit and run, but it's well past my 4-hour session expiring. The table is still probably well above average, but there's no guarantee that staying to play longer will equate to a larger winning session, especially since I'm absolutely mortified right now. I call my wife to make sure we have all of our affairs in order. I have her double and triple check that the will is in a safe spot and that we have enough food and water tucked away in the storm cellar. She asks me why I'm panicking. I tell her I just want a massive pot with pocket kings. Something bad is about to happen real soon. Tonight, I played for 5 hours and 18 minutes. I bought in for $1,600 and cashed out $3,600 for a profit of exactly $2,000. So did I really make over $50,000 playing 2-5 no limit hold'em for 4 months? Well, here I've included every single session I've played between March and June. You can see that I made $16,684 in June. I made $14,817 in May. I made $11,695 in April. And I made $10,226 in March. This is all while playing part-time. The longest I played in a month was 83 hours. This comes to a grand total of $53,422 for the last 4 months between March and June. So, to answer a question from one of my earlier videos, can you make $10,000 a month playing 2-5 no limit hold'em part-time? Well, I've been doing so successfully for at least the last 4 months. Can I continue to do so? Follow along my journey and let's find out together. If you learned something from this video or found the content entertaining or humorous, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that like button. Subscribe to my channel if you're interested in learning how to crush low stakes live cash games, and comment below if you think I played any hands well or if you would have played any hands differently. I'm going to start doing cash drawings for subscribers who like and comment on my videos, so stay tuned for that. And as always, I hope to see you in the next video.